Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. I'm here this evening with episode 27 of the Help Action series here on the channel, where I invite a guest on and we discuss a particular topic that we have chosen ahead of time. And we do a little bit of interview, a little bit of Q&A from the audience. So, I'm really happy to be getting into that. Just a couple of points of business before we kind of kick things off here. Like it says down below, if you have a question for my guest, Fenway, or myself, please go ahead and put it here in the chat and preface it with the question so that I'll have a good chance of catching that as it comes through. Before we get started, I just want to say that due to the subject matter of this particular episode, which is mental health, I have included the number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline in the description of this video down below, as well as a link to a Wikipedia page that has a multitude of international crisis numbers that you can call. If you need help, please do reach out and talk to someone. Also, on a somber note, my heart goes out tonight with Beirut and the Lebanese people. They are facing a horrifying tragedy, and I'm really, really sad for them. Hopefully they can make it through okay. So this evening, like I said, we are going to be discussing mental health, and to help me do that is a guest that I'm very excited to welcome to the channel. Fenway, how are you, son of a bitch?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Doing good. Like I said, it's a Tuesday, so it'll get better.
I feel that.
So how can people find you? What do people know you for around this?
Well, on Twitter, they can find me at Fenway the Teen DM. They probably know me from Jasper's Game Day, as I run a nonprofit organization that raises money for teen suicide prevention and awareness. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Jasper's Game Day.
That's awesome. It's a spectacular thing that you have that you've kind of started. I've been lucky enough to be a part of it the last 2 years online through Jacob Norman at Mini Train Domain. He's a very good friend of mine. I play in his one of his weekly games. It's incredible for anybody to start a charity like this. It's a very selfless act, and I am very happy that it seems to be doing as well as it has been.
Me too. Yeah, it's been amazing to see how it's taken off. Originally, it started off as it was just going to be a one-day event, and we weren't even going to go any further than that. But it kind of blew up. So here we are.
The people have spoken.
Yes, they're like, no, it's going to be longer.
Awesome, because I think it's also nice because it was initially a local thing, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
We started off in our local game store that had just opened up. I think it was a year and a half earlier to that. So it was amazing.
That's really cool, especially now that it's kind of outgrown its boundaries, not only in the length of time that it was originally allotted, but also now it's known, throughout the U.S. and Canada and other parts of the world, because there's people from all over being able to take part in it here virtually on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It definitely has grown its reach recently because of the whole pandemic. So we've been forced to go online, but that has also allowed us to definitely reach a lot more people when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think it's actually done the hobby a lot of good as well, oddly.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing online gaming, virtual gaming, for about 5 years now or so, since I formed the channel. And there were online conventions. That's actually how the channel started. And then I've been, obviously organizing games in different Facebook groups and things like that since then. But since the pandemic hit, there's been so many more people who are itching to be able to get back to the table and realize that they can do so virtually now.
Right.
It's fantastic. That's one good thing to come out of all of this mess, I guess.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's been nice because people have been so generous. And I was worried at first that we weren't going to be able to pull off both the May event and our upcoming August event, because I didn't want to like double tap people. But people have been so generous, and it's been fantastic to see just how like well the community works together.
So, out of curiosity, what spawned this second event? What brought that about?
Well, so we wanted to do an online convention, and so that we could get, because the May event was the May event was just a week of streaming, so nobody that wasn't signed up in those games could participate other than just donating and couldn't play. So we wanted to do something that anybody could play in, like anybody could sign up, no matter time zone, no matter all of that sort of stuff. They could sign up and play in these games, and so that's what started the idea of this. And then people were asking to be involved, and we were like, well, why don't we just stream these few games? And then it started being a lot more than just a few games being streamed.
Again, that's awesome that it kind of blossomed and grew out of control again and again. Yeah, I love gaming online. It's just a whole different kind of animal, and I've been able to meet a huge breadth of people that I never probably would have had the chance to meet and game with, because we're doing it online. So that's awesome that other people can now participate, and it's kind of become its own convention in and of itself.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, I will say that, as I'm sure you can imagine. But we've had some amazing companies like thread writers that we're working with, and the company or the channel called Daddy Warbucks, and we've been working with them. And most of the Jasper's Game Day board of directors have been involved as well.
That's really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. There's another upcoming gaming convention online that I have that I'm a part of called AtCon Online.
Mhm.
That's Absolute Tabletop, with a group of fantastic
Yeah.
publishers who put out RPG content. They've been having physical cons for the last 4 years. This would have been the fourth year, but
Mhm.
obviously we can't do that in person this
Right.
year, so they're moving it online. So I think that's not this coming weekend, but the following. So I've got a few
Mhm.
games that I'm kind of putting together for that, and I'm very excited for them.
Yeah.
Well, shall we get to it?
Absolutely, sounds great.
So one of the first questions that I kind of like to ask my guests is, when and how did you personally find gaming? How did you get into this hobby?
So when I was 11, my dad had been playing for a very long time previous to this. Um, but when I was 11, he decided I was old enough to get into it, and I had been always a very imaginative kid. So he figured it was something that I would definitely like. And so we started. Actually, my first game was online. Maybe that's why I'm so partial to it. But one of the people that we were playing with actually lived in Florida. So we were playing with a couple people from here in Michigan, and a guy and his son from in Florida. And so we played for that. We played like that for about a month. And then we moved because they weren't able to do the gaming anymore. So we moved to in person, and that's actually where I met Jasper, the namesake of Jasper's Game Day.
That's awesome. So you've actually been playing for quite some time,
Yes.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I've been DMing since I was 13.
Hell yeah. I sincerely wish that I had convinced my father to give it a try. That's probably one of my biggest regrets, is because I think he would have really liked it. But he definitely came from the era where there weren't a lot of people who played, and there was a lot of stigma around it.
Right.
Not that he personally held any stigma around it, but it was just not his thing. But it's really cool that your dad kind of taught you how to play, and your first online game being, or your first game being online. That is a trial by fire.
Yes, for sure.
You mentioned that that you do band. Do you do any other kind of performing? Is there anything that kind of got you used to the idea of being in front of a camera or an audience?
Well, so I do marching band and I do concert band. I used to do a little bit of theater when I was younger. My dad actually was a youth pastor and public speaker for a living for a while. And so I've always been learning how to public speak and be in front of a camera. And I don't know, I just kind of enjoy being here. So
That's awesome. It's difficult to come across that level of confidence when you're young. So it's awesome that you seem to have that in spades, and that it comes from your dad. It's a really cool connection.
yeah.
Um, so we talked about it already a little bit, um, but to hit kind of a somber note again here, you're the founder of an incredible charity event that has become somewhat of a full-blown movement, as we've kind of been talking about. Now, as I understand it, this organization is, like you said, named for a gaming friend of yours who sadly took his own life. Suicide is incredibly difficult to grapple with, even for those of us who have been affected by it in a secondhand way. Um, how how did his suicide impact your mental health, and in what ways have you found to cope with that tragedy so far?
Mhm. Well, yeah. So, like you said, ended up taking took his life 3 years ago. So, and I'm still even like dealing with the after effects now. So, I won't say that I have fully managed to cope, and I don't know if anybody ever does, and that effect is always still there. But at the very beginning, I didn't know exactly what to feel. I went through the whole blaming myself and the I should have, could have, would have done this. And I think everybody goes through that. And I think it's a normal cycle. But after a while, I just had to realize that I needed to be honest with myself that I didn't know it was going on and I couldn't have stopped it. Like, there was no way for me to have possibly done anything other than just be who I was and be as kind to him as possible without knowing something was going on. And so it's definitely been D&D has definitely been my coping mechanism because like I said, he was my D&D partner in crime. And so it just has made me feel like I was still able to remember him without having to do so in a negative way.
Yeah, you're honoring the positivity, the good memories that you had together,
Mhm.
and yeah, I think that's amazing. Um, yeah, grief is a well, it's a bitch. Honestly, it's very hard to deal with, and there are every step of the way. Um, it's hard to not lose yourself sometimes, and I think suicide has kind of an extra step thrown in there because you do feel some kind of personal level of, was there something I could have done?
Right.
Was there something that I could have said differently, or was there a question that I could have asked? Excuse me, that I didn't. Um, and yeah, I think you're right. Ultimately, depression and I think suicide, they're things that a lot of people fight alone, unfortunately.
Mm.
I think there's a really positive message that comes along with role playing games, and that's that you don't have to fight these demons, these dragons by yourself. That it's easier or better if you have other people to lean on whenever you need to, whenever your hit points are low, whenever you're
Right.
low on resources. Um, where you are weak, other people can be strong for you. Um, and I think that there's a really beautiful um, kind of poeticness to the fact that you're honoring his memory by creating these kinds of positive interactions with people.
Absolutely. I'm always of the mindset that if somebody focuses on the negative, oftentimes they fall into um, the the aftermath of the suicide that a lot of people try and focus on. Like a lot of times. with teens in schools, suicides happen one after another because it's always like, well, they're always getting this attention. Why I want that. And so I try and look at it as I want to create a positive experience. I want to be able to use the pain and the heartache that was felt because of this and show people that they don't have to feel that same thing, and create hope and happiness and try and prevent rather than just reacting.
It's a very profound outlook. Yeah, it's easy to lose yourself, and again think that you're the only one who's dealing with something. And I think sometimes that's the best moment to reach out to other people, when you feel that kind of vulnerability. It can be hard to do, though. You have to have people that you really, really love and really, really trust, to kind of be able to open that way with people. Well, thank you for answering that question, Fenway.
Absolutely.
So we have a question from the audience here. Mm-hmm. What is your favorite D&D monster? What is your least favorite?
You're gonna put this on me, aren't you? Come on, Jordan. Why do you expect me to be able to pick one? Well, honestly, I'd probably say my least favorite is zombies, because of the fact that they're used so much. I am the rooter for the underdog, the person who likes to use random and chaotic and creative things. So something that's overly done is oftentimes not my style. I will personally say I think my favorite D&D monster, if I had to pick one, would be the Deep Scion. And that would be because that was the first monster I ever incorporated in my first adventure. And so it was all based around these two Deep Scions. And so I think that would have to be my favorite if I had to choose.
That's funny. I think zombies in Dungeons & Dragons aren't done right. That's part of the thing that I have with them, is because they don't spread the way a virus is supposed to spread. And you watch any zombie mythology, that's how it works. But it doesn't work that way in the D&D rules for some weird reason. But I do like zombies. I do have to say that one of my favorite monsters, one of my go-tos in pretty much any campaign that I run, are constructs, mm-hmm. elementals, mm-hmm. and undead, and giants.
That's fair. Yeah.
For some reason, I love those things, but I like trying to spin the narrative on it. I like to present the party with one of those creatures, but then there's something unexpected that happens with them, just a little off of normal. Mm-hmm. I ran a campaign where the genesis was that an army had attacked this walled city, and they had actually been catapulting undead over the walls into the city and letting it spread the way that it should. And the party was coming into this after the fact, where a necromancer had actually set up shop in this abandoned city that was now overrun with undead, was wreaking havoc. So I like trying to do different things with familiar or common monsters.
Absolutely.
Least favorites? I don't know about least favorites. I guess I would have to say, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but a lot of the Underdark stuff, Drow, Illithid, it feels too campaign specific, too setting specific, and it pops up everywhere. But that being said, I'm not above using them.
That's fair. I personally will say that I have added zombies into my campaign before, although I did make them fast zombies. So I like the idea, because who's going to fight a slow zombie? They're just going to run away from it. So if the zombie's fast, then they have to actually do something with it.
And they're terrifying.
That's true too.
They can outrun you.
Yes.
It's not about you being the fastest. It's about you being not the slowest.
You're correct.
In your group. Catherine, sorry, bud. You fall behind, you're on your own. No.
Yeah.
As a follow-up question, Jordan also asks, if you could be a D&D monster, what would it be and why?
Well, I personally, I really like the beholders. The beholders are good ones. I also really like anything from mythology, so like the chimera or the Medusa. I really like those because I'm a huge Greek mythology geek. Funny story, one time I went to the Parthenon and corrected the tour guide. um, so anything Greek mythology related, I am definitely up for that.
That's fantastic. That's what my home group's next long-term campaign is going to be. The one that I'm going to be running in a homebrewed setting of mine. It'll be in the Greco-Roman portion, and
Yeah.
I'm just starting to build terrain and paint miniatures and all that kind of stuff for it. And I haven't started the deep dive into actually reading the mythology and kind of gathering ideas from it and stuff. But I'm very excited too, because it's certainly a topic that I've always liked, and it's very D&D adjacent. There's a lot of mythology that has bled over from Greek and Roman pantheons into Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of their lore. So I'm very much looking forward to kind of learning the more specific things and being able to pull out little ideas and translate it. If I could be a D&D monster, God, I don't know. Something cush, something swank, like a genie, or
that would be fun.
Yeah, I think I probably have to say a djinn.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, not one that's in servitude, one that lives in a different plane of existence or something. That's probably what I would have to go with.
Yeah. I mean, elementals could also be a lot of fun.
Yeah. If I was really pressed for an answer, I might just say dog, because they actually have a pretty good life most of the time. Just lay around and just, people love on you, and
that's fair. Nobody's trying to kill you.
Maybe something smarter. Maybe a blink dog. I don't know.
Blink dog's fun.
Okay, excellent. So we have another question from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one while we're at it. This one is from Tomiko. She says, part of mental health is setting boundaries as to not overextend. What are some strategies that you've used to set and uphold boundaries but remain supportive but not overextended?
Well, a couple of things that I have recently started to do and set in place is I like to use the lines and veils and green lights for my adventures. I try and get those from people as much as possible. I also really like my mentor Satine Phoenix also gave me an idea. If somebody holds up like a red pen, then they're really uncomfortable with the situation. If somebody holds up a yellow pen, they want to veer away from the situation. And if somebody holds up a green pen, then they're fine. So I really like that idea because it's not necessarily an X card, so they don't have to be like, no, I need you to stop now. But they can still verbalize their comfortability and their or uncomfortability in the situation.
Yeah, I'd heard of green light, but I'd never heard it instituted or implemented rather with pens. That's a really nice, clear way, a nonverbal way to do that. So you don't have to interrupt the flow of a game. Even it's just a small little cue. That's a really good representation. Kind of speaking a little bit to that, one of the talking points that I wanted to talk. I wanted to go over is invoking an emotional response from your players and an audience, if you're playing online, is a benchmark for a storyteller. It's kind of what we try to do. It's a direct measure of investment and buy-in from your players and your audience. How do you navigate the kinds of situations that would draw these kinds of responses out of your players, these emotions, but also be mindful of your fellow players' triggers.
Well, so I definitely use the lines and the veils and the green light as the trigger like warning, and I automatically stay away from certain topics that are lines for the players. And I personally I try and describe scenes and the objects that are in the room and the feeling of the entirety of the place that they're in, rather than like death or the I don't have my players describe their kills most of the time, especially not if we're on stream, because I don't want to accidentally trigger someone in the game or outside of the game, and so I focus on like the sensory stuff rather than like the visual, like just visual stuff.
That's a really smart tactic. Yeah, I cannot say that that's my approach. I play very visceral games, and I use a lot of those kinds of visceral reactions to get that kind of shock from my players. I try not to do it simply because, you know, just because, but I try to do it for a purpose,
Yes.
and it's definitely something uh, that it's a good idea to be mindful of. I think because there are people out there who aren't okay with that kind of flippant description. Um, but yeah, I think lines and veils is something that I've been a part of before. X card I have had in place in a recent game actually, and then another thing that I'm a big fan of is session zeros, um,
Yes.
especially for
Me
a
too.
campaign, and sit down and kind of go over. Again, sometimes having the conversation of what are your triggers is a difficult thing to broach with people. Some people aren't comfortable enough to vocalize them or to say them aloud, but maybe even just allowing people to write it down and give it to you so that you can consider it later whenever you're doing your prep work and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I think going over what players can expect, um, the kind of game that you might run, the kind of subjects that you're thinking about maybe touching on or dealing with, the kinds of um, kind of places where the story might go. I think hashing all of that out ahead of time is incredibly helpful to navigate these kinds of waters with people.
Absolutely. One of the things that I recently had in a game, actually with Jordan as the DM, um, she did a Google Forms asking, like, with a bunch of the common triggers or lines and veils, and she said if you have any of these, please check them. If you have something else, she gave a little like an other section where you could put something if you had a line or a veil, and she was very upfront about it, and she gave the utmost privacy, so you didn't even have to like write it down. You could just put it in a Google form, and it was super great to see that. I actually asked her for the form so I could use part of it for my games.
That's a good tool. Good on you, Jordan. Being able to do that anonymously is even better. People, I think, are able to be a lot more honest with those kinds of things about themselves if they are able to maintain their anonymity.
Hmm.
So it's a smart move.
For sure.
Um, so, one of the preloaded questions that I had this evening comes from Matt Click. Um, how can RPGs help neurodiverse folks? What can RPGs do better to provide tools and techniques for those individuals?
So I'm trying to think of My brain didn't fully understand that. Could you repeat the last part of it again? Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, what he's asking is, how can RPGs affect people who are neurodiverse? You know, on the autism spectrum or any other kind of the umbrella
Okay.
is under the umbrella of neurodiverse. And what can RPGs do better in order to provide tools and techniques for those kinds of individuals?
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
I stumbled over the words, so that's my fault.
No, you're fine. I don't do well with hearing sometimes. Well, I do think that they do well with dealing with the neurodiverse community. And I think that one of the ways that, because it's often used for therapy. And I know a lot of counselors from schools in my area often send people from the neurodiverse community to their local game shop to try and get into D&D or into a TTRPG to be able to get along with people a little bit better, like be able to introduce them to a community that automatically is a family. And I think that one of the things that is super important is that they don't have to be themselves. Like they don't have to like play themselves in the game. They can be whoever they want. And so that amazing imagination that they have, they can use and put it into a character that they want to be. They can put it into the person that they want to be. And for a moment, it allows them to be whoever they want, and be part of the group and socialize and everything like that. One of the things I do think that they could do better is having alternative like character sheets and even adventures or descriptions for people in the neurodiverse community, as I think sometimes they have issues understanding what parts are or what's going on. And if I'm using the incorrect terminology, please let me know. I'm not super versed on this, but I think that would be like alternative character sheets or adventure descriptions or something like that, especially for the online games now.
I would have to agree. My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she did a study about some of the different kinds of ways of learning that people have, and it's something that whenever I was a kid going through school, that wasn't ever really brought up. That certain people learn different ways. You know, there are visual learners, there are auditory learners, there's tangible learners, and having to teach one subject, one topic to a diverse group of students is very difficult to do for a single individual, especially whenever they themselves have a very specific way that they learn. Therefore, they think that's the best way to teach most of the time. So it's a hard pattern to kind of get yourself out of. And I think that you're right, because I think RPG books are typically written from kind of that same mentality. This is the way that I understand how to play a game, so this is the way that we're going to present this. It usually follows the lead designer, whoever that is, their kind of typical thought process. So I definitely think having other people come on board and help and say, hey, just so you know, there are people who learn this other way. Maybe we can include, like you said, different character sheets, different explanations of some of the same rules for people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had heard that there were schools that, I think there's a school in Florida, the last I had heard, but this was probably 15, 20 years ago, that was a Dungeons and Dragons magnet school. So all of their lessons were built around playing tabletop role-playing games.
Wow.
Which made me insanely jealous, wishing that I could have attended that school instead. But it's really cool that it's also being used by therapists And I know one of the places that seems um, for it to kind of be applied the best is with people on the autism spectrum.
Hmm.
A lot of times, like you said, it helps them practice socialization. Um, and truthfully, that's one of the things that makes it appealing to any of us, especially us, introverted nerds.
Yeah.
These people who have a hard time socializing typically anyways. It gives us a safe place to practice our social skills, um, problem solving as well, and
Hmm.
fighting and taking on things that you could never possibly take on in your real life. um, I think it kind of gives you a sort of practice so that whenever you go out into the real world, you feel better equipped to handle some of these kinds of situations, even though a lot of them are allegorical or analogs.
Absolutely. One thing that I will say is, what I often when we were not in Corona, I often taught a lot of new players how to play D&D, and I would run an adventure for 4 or 5 of them, and find that a lot of obviously dice sets come in, they're all the same color or all the same style. Um, I find that if you find a dice set that's like the rainbow, then you can say, instead of saying the 8-sider or the shape, you can say the color. And so that helps them associate the number with the dice before having to actually like count the sides. And so I find that that is really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's a great tip. It's something that I never would have thought of, um, but I imagine that that's a lot easier because I've run into the same thing with new players. It's no, it's not that one. It's the one. Nope, not that one. It's the other. Okay, there you go. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, being able to just point and say it's the purple one or it's the blue one, I imagine that would do wonders, especially for certain people who don't who don't just have that kind of ability to look at a shape and realize, how many sides it has. I imagine that would go a long ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that it helps a lot. Even sometimes I do it with myself because I'm like, I just don't have the brain power for this today. So I'll pull it out and I'm like, this is the correct one. And it's just nice because then they start to associate the number with the dice after, like when you start teaching them. So it helps because they start to automatically go to it after they start learning, and they don't have to think about it.
Right, because you kind of already developed that connection. So now they're actually looking at it and recognizing the shape. Even
Mhm.
if it may be a different color later on down the road, now they're actually able to just look at it and know without
Right.
having to count the sides. Okay, that's the D8. I recognize
Mhm.
that one by the shape of it. Um, yeah, that's a really good tip. Okay, we have another question from Jordan. DM and player burnout can be very real. Truth. What are some ways that you can relax and combat this?
So usually what I end up doing is I end up putting headphones in. I actually really like to write poetry. So I will put my headphones in and I'll write for a little while, or I'll just watch some TV, relax. Sometimes I'll go out, and my mom actually has like this pedicure membership type thing, and so sometimes I'll go and get pampered with her a little once in a while. So just spending time with my family, or even just by myself, and just kind of detaching and just focusing on one thing without having to focus on a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, I would have a very similar answer, honestly. I am somewhat again, an introvert. Like I enjoy spending time by myself. So I will build terrain or craft miniatures um, or the opposite, whatever. And yeah, I am a music file. I have a playlist that I'm listening to right now while we're running the show. I like to have music going in the background, especially when I am prepping for games or running games. And typically, what that is instrumental music. It's stuff that doesn't have any lyrics. It's mainly video game soundtracks, movie soundtracks, that kind of thing, that helps to
Mm-hmm.
kind of put me in the right headspace for what I'm working on. Burnout is absolutely real.
Yes.
I figured out probably last year sometime what my limit for online gaming kind of was. And I had to kind of scale it back a little bit so that I could keep my sanity intact. Because as much as I enjoy gaming and running games, there's definitely a certain point that I hit creatively where if I'm pushing myself too hard, if I have 4 or 5 games in a single week and I'm running 2 of them, by the end of that week, I feel spent. I feel exhausted, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally exhausted. Um, so it's definitely a very real thing that I've had to deal with before.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as relaxation, I step away. Like you said, um, I am a very, um, I watch a lot of movies, a lot of television,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of my zen is I get to sit down and watch somebody else's stories for a while, um,
Yeah.
and that doesn't expect or take anything from me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of times that ends up killing 2 birds with 1 stone because a lot of times I get inspiration from the things that I'm watching, and that ends up inspiring my creativity more times than not. It kind of it turns the muse back around and gets me back involved in what I'm trying to work on. Um, I have a video that I did here on the channel about that called steeping, and
Mm-hmm.
it's if you're going to run a game set in World War II, then watch a World War II movie. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you glean things from the media that you take in, and that will steep into your project if you are kind of mindful of it, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started DMing, I think it was right before I started Jasper's. It was like when I was 14. I was DMing 2 or 3 games a week for like 3 months. Um, and so after that, I just was like, nope, I can't do it anymore. This is not how this is gonna work. And so I think I went to down to 1 game every other week. After that, and I just was like, I need a break. And I also do a lot of the same things with TV and movies and stuff. Although I do call it my osmosis instead of steeping. So there's a little difference there.
That's perfect. You can't have steeping without osmosis. So that's perfect.
Right, yeah.
That's funny. Um, yeah, I think it's important, and I think maybe that's even a point to this entire topic. It's good to know what your boundaries are. It's good to know what your limitations are, what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Um, it's difficult sometimes to know that and discover that on your own, but that's why it's important to talk about this kind of stuff with people. Um, and if you can, a therapist to help you work through these things, to give them a name so that way you understand better what's going on while it's happening to you. That you're not frightened and confused in addition to whatever else that you may have to be dealing with. I think that's a very good takeaway for me from this.
Absolutely. I personally have a therapist that I see. I like once every other week, and so I do use that opportunity to be able to just talk to someone and not have to worry about burdening them or um, like upsetting them. But they're there to talk about issues or to help me. They're to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's important. Again, just knowing, just understanding that there's sometimes even just understanding there's a term for it
Mm-hmm.
helps you to realize, oh, it's not just me. It's not just something that I'm doing or going through. Um, and I think that may not be given enough credit, honestly. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. my mom's family has a pretty long history of mental illness, bipolar, manic depressive, schizophrenic to some degree, and I think, at least, knock on wood, that it skipped me, and I'm very thankful for that. Hopefully, my son doesn't end up having to deal with any of that, because I've seen what it can do to people when it goes undiagnosed and untreated. Um, because people are either in denial about there being an issue, or it's just something that you don't talk about, and therefore it just goes unchecked, and that's no good for anybody.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's very unhealthy. So if you suspect that you have something like that, absolutely seek help. There's no shame in it. There's no erase the stigma, just like from gaming.
Mhm.
Like it's ridiculous that it's there in the first place. Shatter it.
Absolutely.
Take care of yourself. Um, so we talked about it being therapy in and of itself, gaming, and I wanted to bring up a point. Recently, I ran a game that featured player characters as soldiers who were suffering from PTSD. One of the players illustrated this as his character carrying around his dog, which in his mind was merely injured, but in reality, the dog had already died. After the game, the player confessed to us that his dog in real life had actually recently passed away, and that being able to explore that loss, his loss through the game, was incredibly cathartic for him on a personal level. So I want to ask you, what is it in your mind about role playing games that provides this kind of informal therapy for some of life's difficult moments?
Well, like I mentioned previously, I think it allows you not to have to deal with reality for a little while. Even if it's just like an hour game, you don't have to play a character that is yourself. So you don't have to be dealing with whatever is going on at home, at school, in your head, anything like that. You can just be in the game using your imagination to do whatever you want. And, well, of course, within a reasonable level. um, but I think it allows people to um, explore other opportunities. So people of the LGBTQ community might be able to explore playing a person or a character of the other gender, or a non-binary character, or something like that. And so it might allow them to um, experience or explore a side of them that they're not ready to explore in real life, or well, not in real life, like in public, in like their regular life, their non D&D life just yet.
Yeah, I think that's like you said, being able to kind of practice what that's like, kind of feel it out a little bit, is is sometimes a very very important step for people. Um, I think for some people, the last person that you will admit something to is yourself, um, and I think there's a lot that can be seen in people's real personalities whenever they play games. Um, there's a quote, and I cannot remember who it's from. It says something about you can learn more from a man in a single hour of play than you can in years and years of conversation. I think that there's something about us when we play games. I think part of our true nature comes through. Um, and I think if you're paying attention, that you can understand a lot more about someone by the way they play a game. Not necessarily the character that they choose to play, but the way they play the game. Um, and I think it reveals a lot about them, about their inner nature. And and I think, like you said, I think there's a part of us that understands that, even if we're not conscious of it. So being able to explore new ideas, new ways of thinking, things that you would never do or try or say in real life, I think that that can be very cathartic.
Absolutely. I think that oftentimes people are afraid to try new things in their regular lives, but in D&D, excuse me, it's just a game. Um, well, it is just a game, but it can be used as some place to say, well, I wouldn't do this normally, but why don't I try it because I have the opportunity to here? Or it allows their personality to come out without them having to worry about being judged.
Yeah, that's another fantastic point. I think, yeah, I think it's nice because, like you said, most people aren't going to judge your character, the way you play them, um, and again, it gives you the chance to test that out, especially a lot of times amongst really close friends, people that you trust. Um, so yeah, I think it's a really important part of the healing that role playing
Mm-hmm.
games are able to give to people. Um, okay, so moving right along, we have a question from Jordan. So both of you have touched upon your campaigns and creations. What do you find that most inspires you? Books, movies, music, photos, art, etc. We have touched on this a little bit, but in case you wanted to address it with a more specific answer.
Absolutely. I will say there is someone in the chat named Wilhelm. I think that's how you pronounce it. They did ask a question, but they did not put the question colon in front of it. So there, and I think it's a very important question. That's why I bring it up. But so I think that something that inspires me the most is definitely um, movies, books. Um, Television in general. I'm more of a visual slash tangible learner. So movies, the way that the story flows definitely um, works in my mind a lot better. So I have definitely taken a few ideas here and there. I did a campaign a while back that was based off of a lot of the Disney, the well, not Disney, but kind of Disney, the original Disney fairy tales, so the ones that the Brothers Grimm wrote. Um, and so I really like old books and that sort of stuff too. So that's definitely where I pull from a lot.
That's awesome. I have a setting, the game that I was actually just talking about, the one
Oh
where
yeah.
the characters were soldiers with PTSD. It They started off as soldiers in World War I in the trenches in France, and they actually managed to find and step through a wall of ice that looked like glass. And they actually went into a world that I have a setting that's called Downland. That the basic premise is that it's Wonderland and Oz mixed together with a very dark coat of paint over it. Um, the idea is that the world itself was actually created by children's dreams brought manifest, and that over time it has actually kind of waned and darkened and kind of grown cynical. And in particular, this was they were very young soldiers. When they went, they actually found that the world was being consumed by the nothing, because the war was raging through Europe at that time, and so the children were no longer dreaming of these wonderful, whimsical things. So I definitely love that kind of, like you said, the original source material, the Grimm's fairy tales,
Mm-hmm.
because they do such a fantastic job of weaving the the mystery and the whimsy and the wow of fantasy with its darker half. It's really grisly, awful sometimes
Mm-hmm.
stories, and it they those stories touch on both of those aspects very very well. So they're very appealing to me.
Me as well. I think that oftentimes people see things as black and white, and I like to think of it as everything isn't just black and white. There's that little gray space there too. Like when paints are mixing, like it's the all white and the two different colors, and then they mix a little bit in the middle, and I think that color in the middle is often the most beautiful. So definitely the mix of the two aspects is great.
Yeah, I tend to agree. There's definitely a tendency for people to be extremists. It's
Mm-hmm.
either this or it's this. When in the reality, if it's just a step this side of either one, it's part of the middle, and that's like you said, that's the best stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you are able to combine this genre with this idea from a different genre together. That's when it starts to become something really unique and flavorful and fun. Um, and I think that would probably also go directly into my answer to this question that Jordan has asked. And I take inspiration from wherever it will hit me, honestly. Um, Oftentimes, that is movies and television shows because that's what I spend the majority of my time consuming. But I've also had ideas from comic books, video games, something that I overheard while walking down the street, a television commercial, a news article, history. Um, I think there's all kinds of things that can spark your imagination because when you're really breaking it down, inspiration is not about the the exact thing that you saw or heard or read. It's about what happens to that thing when it goes through the filter of your brain. Whatever comes out the other side, that's the thing where you need to be putting your effort in. Because it's going to be wholly unique because it has passed through the filters of who you are up here, your past
Mm-hmm.
experiences, the way you interpreted the way it was said or done. Um, and I think it's better that way, honestly.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Yeah. Excellent. Moving right along, we have another question from Tamiko. Fear of missing out, FOMO, is real. Did you ever have a time when you decided to not play or run something, but did it anyway because the FOMO won out?
um, well, I think there have been a couple times. Um, I almost I almost was too nervous. So I don't know how much you guys know about what happened in the May event for Jaspers, but I ran the kind of kickoff event on D&D Beyond's channel, and my players were Todd Kenrick, Satine Phoenix, Pat Rothfuss, Amy Lindazura, and Jessica Lynn Parsons. And I don't know if it would be FOMO necessarily or what it would be, but I was very, very nervous to be able to run this game because I made the characters, I wrote the adventure, I did basically everything for this. And like, I also got artwork done for all of the characters. And so, like, it was an amazing experience for me, and I am so glad that I did end up running it, even through my nerves, because I think that is one of the most fun and entertaining games I've ever been part of.
That's an incredible lineup of people. Um, it's amazing. I can't think of a single person that I know that wouldn't have been nervous. Um, but truth be told, like I'm nervous before every single game that I play in or that I run
Mm-hmm.
in, or even these help actions and things. But I don't think it's a case of getting to a point where you're not nervous. I think nervous is good. It gives
Mm-hmm.
you energy. And whenever you're doing something like this in front of an audience, you need to have that energy. Um, and I think it's more kind of just about learning that you're going to get nervous, and that's okay. And then just figuring out how to funnel that into a positive energy that you can tap into and use. Um, you mentioned doing theater, and I don't know if you ever experienced this or not, but for me, the most nerve wracking part of doing theater was standing in the wings waiting for your cue to go out on stage. That was the worst feeling in the world. You're like, oh my God, I feel dizzy. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel like my skin is clammy and
Mm-hmm.
sweating. And understanding that that's just a precipice. that's just a point where you're going to get to, and you have a choice to make. You can either chicken out and not, or you can take that one step past that precipice, and then it goes away.
Yeah.
And you start enjoying yourself, and it's all fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, every time that I run something online, I have the first like 5-10 minutes where I'm like kind of shaky, but then I just jump right into it, and then I'm fine the rest of the time.
Yeah, it's always good to have that initial kind of 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, kind of help break the ice for everybody to kind of get on the same wavelength as far as the energy goes. And I think that's oftentimes, for role playing games at least, that's one of the jobs of the DM.
Mm-hmm.
Is you're kind of the pace setter. You're the car that's out front that's kind of setting everybody else's tone. They're going to follow and match whatever you're doing. So if you come into a game and you have really high energy, then the chances of someone else rising to match you are much better, as opposed to if you're not feeling it, and your energy and your focus isn't there, your players are going to pick up on that. And it's going to drag down everybody else's energy as well. So sometimes it's just better to take a break, to just call it, before the session even happens, and just reschedule it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So moving along, there's another question, the one that you had pointed out by Wilhelm. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that last name. I am very sorry. What's a good way to tell a DM or other player that their way of play might be traumatizing to yourself or others without them getting defensive?
Well, I think part of talking to someone is automatically them going to be slightly defensive at the very beginning. I'm not sure, that there is a way that you can get around that. However, there are ways you can approach the situation to make them feel as comfortable with talking to you as possible. So one of the ways that I definitely suggest is don't go at it combatively. Don't come into it with an aggressive point of view. Come into the conversation with I want to find that happy place where they can express their feelings and I can express mine, so that if they're doing something that is traumatizing for me or traumatizing to another player that I am that doesn't feel comfortable enough to bring up their own trauma, then I feel then you can bring it up in a positive manner. So give an alternative. Be like, if you're doing this and this is traumatizing, then can we possibly move it to do something like this? So give them an alternative to what they're doing so that they don't have to come up with something all on their own. Or, as Tamika commented in the chat, a compliment sandwich.
I have heard it put in other terms from that, but yes, the concept is, you have a compliment on one side.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the issue. Compliment on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing that I figured out when I was younger, and I'm very thankful that I figured this out. But generally speaking, when someone does something that offends you or hurts your feelings, most of the time it was not done with that intent. It has less often to do anything with you, and more often to deal with something that person is going through, dealing with, or a fault of theirs. And I think you're absolutely right. The best way to make sure that somebody isn't defensive is to not be offensive whenever you approach them. Being defensive when somebody calls you on bad behavior is a pretty natural response. Though some people do definitely take it too far. Criticism is hard to accept for a lot of us, and especially whenever you're being told that you're doing something incorrectly, and that it's causing someone harm. That's also not generally a good thing to hear. I think if you're comfortable doing so, doing it one-on-one is best. Calling them out, especially like during the middle of a game or at the table in front of everybody, is never going to go well. That definitely is going to make somebody defensive because they feel like they're being ganged up on. So, yeah, those are always difficult conversations to have.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, it's not something that I've had to do very often, at least in the gaming at the gaming table. But I have had difficult conversations that are very similar to that with players who were no longer players after the conversation. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. If you tell someone that they're doing wrong and they need to correct what they're doing because it's affecting other people, even if it's not you directly, and they're not willing to change or make a concession to be compassionate towards other people, you're better off not having them at your table, honestly.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that I've never had to experience it, luckily, because I mostly run one shots. But I've seen a few other campaigns that have either broken up or lost players or even lost a DM because of the lack of interpersonal respect. And I would even go as far as to say that if you have to do this, then do it either in person or like on a video call, because emotion and inflection are so hard to read through text, through email, through message, whatever you're using that's online. It's so hard to read that with it. You could be reading it, it's meant to be sad and emotional, you could be reading it as sarcasm. So do it in a way that they can understand where your voice inflection is. So whether that's in person, on a FaceTime call, whatever it is, do it something that is the easiest to understand, that you're not trying to harm them, you're just trying to better it for yourself.
Yeah, I feel that sarcasm comment hardcore. I am a sarcastic person. I'm a smartass with my sense of humor, and I had to figure out very quickly that that does not translate in text or via email at all. um, so that's a fantastic point, and I think it shows somebody that you respect where they're coming from enough to help hopefully build a solid bridge between you, at least to lay the foundations of that communication, um, to be open and honest with people. And um, yeah, I think approaching it from the, hey, this isn't about changing you or taking something away from you or pointing blame at you. This is about making sure that I'm standing up for myself and that
Mhm.
my needs are also being met. Because, as everybody knows, your rights end where mine begin. That's the way it's supposed to work. Um, if you are doing something that is infringing on my rights, then we need to have a conversation. Um, so I think that's wise. Um, One of the things that I wanted to talk about is that we've already kind of discussed what RPGs can help to alleviate or even possibly heal as far as issues stemming from mental health. How do they help as a preventative measure? Is there anything that gaming can offer on the level of mental health during the good days?
Absolutely. I think that it allows you to see those good days and appreciate them as a, well, these good days have been good, so I want to keep them going in that way. And it helps you allow yourself to go. Keep yourself in that direction, keep yourself in an upbeat mood. I think that definitely there are the same amount of benefits for people who um, either don't struggle as much with mental health, or they're on their good days. And I think that there are so many benefits for both sides of the conversation. Like, it still allows for a family. It still allows for, even if you don't even acknowledge some issues, you can still work them out in gameplay. And so I think it goes, with the therapy idea, um, even if you're not dealing with some of the issues you used to have been, or you think you might have.
Yeah, and I think again, it kind of goes back to that giving you the tools that you may need. Um, Even whenever you may be in a good mental place, in a good state, as far as whatever struggle you may have that reoccurs, um, or like you said, if you don't happen to struggle with these things at all, um, I think that it can still give you clear tools and techniques and tricks to arm yourself against the next time you might confront one of those situations. Um, and I think again in the game, a lot of it is done through allegory. It's a lot of analogy and metaphor, but I think being aware of what those are, um, kind of the reality behind the fantasy, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that can give you a really healthy understanding of how to apply some of those ideas and techniques into the real world in real ways.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that.
All right. So rolling right along here. This is good. This is a good conversation. Um, we have a question from the Luca Bear. They ask, except for the usual relax and play the way you play, or try to take small steps towards more, or anything along those lines, do you have any other tips for introvert, shy players?
Well, I don't know if I have any tips, because I personally, what's called an ambivert, so I am both introverted and extroverted. So I am not usually an introverted player. However, from a DM dealing with an introverted player um, standpoint, I can definitely give those tips. um, I definitely think, allowing them to, like, if focusing on them every once in a while, being like, hey, what are you going to do? Maintaining eye contact, not allowing them to slip into themselves, and bringing them out into the game. And allowing, that's why session zeros are so important, especially for this type of thing, is because you can create little hooks and little adventure points that are going to specifically, invite them to be part of the encounter. So it's a great tool to be able to hook someone in, and then keep yanking them into the circle, and not allow them to relax, or relax into themselves, I guess, because that's definitely like their safe space, but to bring them out of their shell just a little bit and help them grow another shell just slightly outside the first one.
Yeah, I think sharing the spotlight at the table is a huge boon, just to a table's dynamic. Period. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Not only as the dungeon master, the game master, but even just as another player, understanding that when there's a cool moment, that you having the spotlight is great, but it's better whenever you and someone else can have that spotlight,
Mm-hmm.
or when you do the setup and somebody else gets to spike the ball over the net.
Mm-hmm.
Realizing when other people need a moment, their dice are rolling poorly, or they're kind of in a dour mood, or they're introverted and a little shy. bolster them up, give them a moment to shine, and do everything that you can to highlight that, and to celebrate it. When they do well, congratulate them. One of the most exciting times at a table for me is when someone else rolls a 20. I get excited. I give them a high five, jump up and down, pump my fist. Like, I get genuinely excited, especially if it's in a clutch moment in the game, because that's the way everybody's feeling inside, and that's what's going on in the story. It's that moment where they pull it out of the fire at the end. That's worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
And I think that, and maybe on the other side, is developing trust. I think that's crucial. Even with people who are extroverts, I think establishing trust at your table is a key ingredient to making sure that your game is one that people keep wanting to come back to, and ones that they will push to greater heights and greater depths emotionally if they know that everybody that's sitting at the table is going to have their backs. Because when you're going to have a scene where, as an example, you may have a very emotional, sad scene where your character is weeping and you may be moved to tears. Being able to do that in front of people that you don't wholly trust is very difficult. But if you have established that kind of safety net ahead of time, that, hey, it's cool. If you want to explore this, we're going to be here for you, and we're going to do what we can to prop you up. Feeding into that emotion even creates very, very powerful moments at the table. And sometimes even personally, people, like I said, may be working through something cathartically, and you may be helping them deal with that in a very real way.
Absolutely. I would say that as a DM, sometimes I can tell when somebody is really needing a win. And so I will admit, sometimes I do give the monster a few extra hit points, or just say, I want this person to kill it, because I know that they look like they really need this win today. And so I don't do it constantly, but I do it every once in a while when I can tell that somebody needs that excitement, needs that feeling of accomplishment and success.
Yeah, absolutely. I follow narrative very closely. So if a villain, for example, was spawned because of someone's backstory, if they have a very obvious rivalry, then chances are, if they get close to the end of their hit points and then that person gets a solid hit on them, I'm going to let them have the kill, because it means more to the story, as opposed to the next round, the next turn, the wizard casts magic missile from across the room and deals minimum damage, but it was enough to put it over past the threshold, and now the monster's dead.
Right.
Yeah, I think rewarding the narrative and the players is sometimes more important than sticking true to the raw mechanics.
Right. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I've got one other preloaded question that I brought in, and then I have one other question that I have for you. So this question, one of the preloaded ones, is from Keel Adam, and he asks, recently, diving back into the RPG hobby has been a huge cornerstone in coping with depression and anxiety and improving my overall mental health. How has the hobby helped you both personally?
Well, I will say that I personally struggle from depression and anxiety, and I also struggle from some sleep stuff and ADHD, and so D&D has allowed me to not think about those specific issues. It has created this family that I realize that I can. I don't have to preface anything going on. I can just say, I need you to be here, and they'll be here. And so having that family to fall back on. And I mean, every family has the crazy aunts and uncles. So of course we have those too, but even they are endearing. And it's nice to know that people have your back no matter what. And even if things are going on um, outside and at school, at home, anything like that, it's nice to know that um, it there are people who will be there for me no matter what.
Yeah, my closest friends are the ones that I've made through gaming, without a doubt. Um, I still play with a couple of different individuals that I've been playing with since I was 14. So 25 years, 26 years at this point. Um, and our friends, our friendship is such that, our kids get together for each other's birthday parties, and, we go out of town twice a year with each other on vacation. It's a very, very tight knit group of people. They're definitely the people that I turn to first whenever I have something going on in
Mhm.
my life that I feel like I can't deal with on my own with the help of my wife. Um, and I think it is crucial because, like, I love my family very, very much, but there's a lot of them that don't understand me. and and I've definitely been the black sheep for a large percentage of my life. Um, and being able to have my circle of friends kind of be my adopted family, as you put it, has been incredibly helpful for my development as a person.
Mhm.
Um, so my last question that I have for you, unless something else comes in from the audience, is the last one that I have. Despite being very young, you have made some remarkable achievements already in your life, um, especially within the gaming community. Your message has reached some very high profile people within the circles of the RPG world. And for me personally, my teenage years held a lot of soul searching and inner reflection. And I know undoubtedly that helped shape who I later became as a man. Do you feel that your experiences within the gaming community are shaping your path into adulthood? And if so, in what ways?
I definitely do believe that it's shaping my path, just into the future in general, because through D&D and through Jasper's Game Day as a whole, I have realized I want to go into either sociology or psychology, because I love the study of the brain and I love the study of people. And I love being able to read people's emotions, read how they're acting, and that's something that comes from being a DM. And so I feel like being a DM and seeing how that can interact with even just a game, and let alone putting it to work in in life in general, is something that's incredibly inspiring to me. And so I want to be able to help people in the way D&D has helped me.
That's a fantastic answer, Finley. Thank you. Um, yeah, psychology has always been very, very interesting to me. Um, we as human beings are fascinating creatures. The way that our minds work is difficult to study because there's such a huge variety, and while there are commonalities, there's enough nuance um, that it changes from individual to individual. And knowing what makes a person tick, is definitely a it's a an incredible tool to have as a game master. Understanding basic psychology of your players. Um, I think that's one of the reasons why when you find a good gaming group, when you find a good table, that's how the games get to be as good as they are is because people are able to recognize, oh, so and so is starting to get their attitude on. I know where this is headed, and you can do what you can to help ramp it to that point faster. And I think it's very helpful as a dungeon master to be able to hook people. Understand. I understand who the person is that responds to the promise of treasure, so I know how to get them involved. I know the person that every time a child is in danger, they're going to come running and they're going to grab 2 or 3 other NPCs to help out. So I know how to get them involved. I think it's a very useful thing to keep in your utility belt as a BAT DM. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to add to that. I don't think so. But sincerely, I think it's amazing what you have already managed to do at the age of 17. It's almost unheard of, honestly. And I think it's fantastic that you have already laid so much of a foundation for you to build on into the future. And the fact that it's around gaming just makes it even better.
Absolutely. And I will say that obviously it's not just me. I wouldn't be here without my parents, without my siblings, without the people we work with, thread raiders and MTD, and everybody that I game with. I wouldn't be here without everybody's support. So just thank you to all of you watching, and thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, honestly. I really do enjoy talking about these kinds of topics. Part of that is because of an inner love for psychology. And I like to game with people. I really do. I love to play games with people. I love to run games for people. But these kinds of conversations are different. It's nice to be able to get to know a person beyond what they bring to a gaming table. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing this series of videos. And it's been fantastic having you come on and discuss mental health with me today. So thank you very, very much.
Of course, it's been my pleasure. I'm glad to. Obviously, I'm not a professional, at least not yet. But I really enjoy at least giving my experience and my take on things.
Absolutely. All of this is pure anecdotal.
Yes.
I am certainly not a professional. Don't quote me.
No quotes, please.
No quotes. I didn't do it. Don't blame me. But no. Yeah, if you like what you saw, there's 26 previous episodes for you to check out here on the channel, and hopefully there will be at least 26 additional episodes after this. Next month, I have my guest who is supposed to be coming on. He is a man alien by the name of Locrius. He is going to be coming on and discussing music. Music? I don't know why I turned into Sean Connery. Discussing music. He is a professional musician at some point in his life. I don't know if he still is or not, but we're going to be talking about music and RPGs, and I'm looking very much forward to that one as well. If you tuned in, if you tuned in this evening, please drop a like, subscribe. There's lots of live plays on the channel as well. I sincerely appreciate everybody stopping by and watching, whether you watched live with us this evening or whether you may be tuning in at some point in the future. Wash your hands, wear a mask, stay home, be kind to one another. And until next time, your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.